From the campus of the University of Kentucky, you're listening to Behind the Blue. I'm Cody Kaiser with UK Strategic Communications. This episode of Behind the Blue discusses suicide and suicide prevention. Some of the content may be distressing or triggering to certain listeners. Listener discretion is advised. If you or someone you know is experiencing suicidal thoughts or a mental health crisis, you are not alone. Help is available 24 hours a day by calling or texting 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline.
There are two really important factors. Well, there's more than two, but the two that are relevant to this conversation that increase someone's risk for suicide. One of them is feeling like a burden on others, and the other one is a lack of belonging. So if you think about that, right, expressing care for someone, expressing hope, saying, hey, I'm worried about you, that's going to make somebody feel like they're part of a community. They know somebody loves them, cares about them. I think people maybe don't realize how powerful just asking someone, hey, are you okay? Or saying, I really care about you and I'm really worried about you. That can be a massively important, turning point for someone. And it's not that simple, of course. Suicide is very complex, right? There's, a lot more that goes into this, but that doesn't change the fact that providing somebody hope can be an incredibly positive thing.
That's Sarah Geegan, Assistant Professor in the Department of Integrated Strategic Communication. At the University of Kentucky, suicide prevention isn't just the work of mental health professionals. It's a shared responsibility. Every member of our community can learn to recognize warning signs, ask the right questions, and help connect someone in crisis with support. On this episode of Behind the Blue, I'm joined by Geegan and Rhein, a junior ISC major, to talk about QPR, Question, Persuade, Refer, a national training program that teaches anyone how to intervene in a mental health emergency. Through a partnership with UK Healthcare, QPR Training is now offered online at no cost to all Kentuckians. Anyone can visit ukhealthcare.com/QPR to complete the training in about 30 minutes and learn how to help save a life. Geegan shares how her own experiences and research have led her to champion QPR at UK, while Rhein offers her perspective as a student and peer advocate who's used the training in real life. Together, they discuss the power of communication in preventing suicide, the importance of breaking stigma, and how empathy and connection can save lives, sometimes with just one question. Sarah Geegan and Rhein, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us on Behind the Blue. First things first, Sarah and I have a pretty significant background. We've worked together for many years, and she was part of staff here, was a student here when I first came and worked on recruitment video stuff. So Sarah, I want you to kind of tell a little bit about your kind of journey here at the university. And Cece, I also want you to talk about your journey here as well, where you're from, where you grew up, and how you ended up here at UK, and what kind of drew you into the path of study that you're in. So
Cece's pointing at me and telling me to go first, so I'm happy to do that. So yeah, I've worn a lot of different hats here at the University of Kentucky. I did my undergraduate degree here, came here in 2008, graduated in 12. And then right out of undergrad, I joined the UK PR staff, which is where we first met. Cody, I guess we actually met when I was interning here at the sort of final semester of my senior year. Worked here for about 10 years, started off as a PR writer, then moved into some more specific speech writing and working really closely with the president and his senior team. And during that time, I kind of chipped away at my master's degree in the College of Communication and Information, and then subsequently my PhD as well. So finished my PhD in December of 2021. And then I got incredibly lucky when a faculty position opened up in the Department of Integrated Strategic Communication. And it's typically unusual for someone who graduates from a program within a specific university to then get a faculty position at that same place. But like I said, I was just very lucky. It was a very good fit in terms of the professional experience I had coming into that role, because it was focused on teaching public relations, which is what I'd been doing. So now I'm a faculty member and absolutely love it. And I have the opportunity to work with incredible students like Cece on both, education and research.
Cece, what about you?
Yeah, so I'm from Mason, Ohio, which is right where Kings Island is. And all through high school, I was a part of a peer-to-peer suicide prevention group. And a large part of what I did there was like community outreach and education stuff. And I kind of knew that I really liked the communication aspect of that role. So I was really looking for programs where I could do kind of public relations focused communication, especially when it comes to nonprofits, which really drew me to UK kind of immediately. There was like one college recruiter that brought ISC up to me, and I kind of immediately knew that's exactly where I wanted to come. And that's how I got here. I'm now a junior with a minor in community leadership and development and a minor in public policy, and I'm a Gaines Fellow, and I absolutely love being here.
Excellent. So to kind of set the framing for what we're talking about today, we want to kind of delve into your work in this area. And one of the things I was thinking about with this is that, here at UK, suicide prevention is not just the work of mental health professionals. It's something that every student or faculty or staff member can be a part of. And so we're talking about a program called QPR, which is Question, Persuade, Refer, and teaching people the skills to recognize warning signs and connect others with help. Sarah, for someone hearing about this for the first time, I know that's kind of a broad brush explanation, but what exactly, what is QPR training and how does it compare? Because I know there's kind of a comparison there, and not only in the initials, but also kind of in the mindset. How does it compare to something like CPR?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the way you framed that, because when you said, it's something that students and faculty and sort of all members of the community can be a part of, because that's really the message we've been trying to drive home, is that suicide prevention is a community responsibility, and it's something that we can all be a part of. And QPR is a really great way to do that. So as you said, it stands for Question, Persuade, Refer. It's a national platform. And yes, we compare it to CPR because if you think about sort of like the fundamental principle of CPR, it's the idea that a non-medical professional, if they see somebody in an emergency, in cardiac arrest, they have the skills to intervene and get that person to, a medical professional who can then help them more long-term. And QPR is based on the same principle. And so we say it's like CPR for the mind. If an individual sees another individual in a mental health crisis, QPR gives them the skills to intervene, to help them in that moment, help, navigate them out of that crisis or get them to somebody else who can help them do that more long-term. So it teaches warning signs, things that research shows us might indicate that somebody is at higher risk for suicide. It teaches you how to have a conversation with someone if you're worried about them. We hear a lot when we go to events and talk about this work that just that conversation feels very daunting. People think, this is a private matter that I shouldn't ask someone about, or, somebody might get mad at me if I question their mental health. So this training teaches you some, kind of gives you some tools to initiate that conversation in a way that doesn't feel quite as scary. And then the final part is refer. So teaching people how to get somebody that they're concerned about into a resource that can help them. So the training in the past, typically it costs money. It's something that you might bring a QPR instructor into, let's say a staff meeting, or an employer might bring them into like a company retreat or something, and host a QPR training, which is great. And in-person trainings are fantastic, but that's not super accessible. So UK Healthcare recognized that this is a big need. Suicide is the second leading cause of death in Kentucky among people aged 10 to 34. And this training has demonstrated some really great results in terms of if you have more people trained, suicide rates tend to go down within a given community. So they essentially paid the bill for any Kentuckian to take this training online for free. So it's at ukhealthcare.com/QPR. It takes about 30 minutes or so. You get a certificate at the end when you complete the training. And again, it's a pretty accessible and easy way for us to prepare ourselves. You hope you're never in that situation where someone you love is in a dark place, but it's a way to prepare yourself to act and provide someone hope when they can't see it themselves. And so I really recommend that people take the training.
What motivated you personally to bring this forward and kind of make it part of your work here at UK?
Yeah. I am someone who has struggled with mental health my whole life. I have clinical depression. So I know what it's like to be in that dark place. And, when I think about, some of the more difficult experiences I've had in my life, it feels really good to kind of turn that pain into something powerful that could help other people. And so when I was always fascinated with the power of communication to do good, sort of generally. Then I started thinking about, stigma. Can we use communication to fight stigma, sort of writ large, and then sort of narrowed it down, and now feel really good to be sort of specifically in the suicide prevention communication space.
Cece, you mentioned being involved in a group in high school, and I'm sure there were plenty of personal interactions and stories that you have that kind of inspired kind of your direction as well. Was that like, what was your kind of personal background and kind of driving you to want to be involved?
Yeah, absolutely. I think definitely being a part of that organization all through high school really highlighted how impactful a community is. And I really loved getting to feel that sense of community and know that I was working to help people and deliver positive outcomes. I was trained in QPR my freshman year of high school, and it made me feel so much more equipped as just like a regular person, not just as someone who is hoping to support her peers, but in everyday life. And getting to continue to promote QPR and make sure that other people have access to this great resource has really brought me a lot of joy as well.
So I want to talk a little bit about how this was introduced. I know you mentioned that we've got the UK Healthcare website, but how kind of was this introduced to the university kind of atmosphere, and how did this program kind of evolve to involve students and to also to kind of, be something that we looked at and said, this is important. It's important for us to make this available to everybody.
Yeah, there's a great story behind it. It's funny how seemingly meaningless moments can become incredibly meaningful. So the initiative started with the Healthy Kentucky initiative, which is a unit within UK Healthcare, promoting, doing all the logistical stuff, right? Working with QPR to set up the website, to purchase the licenses, all of those things. I joined the project a little bit later after they had already established the infrastructure, and it happened just because I was lucky enough to sit next to a woman named Jenny Jenwright at UK Healthcare at lunch at an event. I had not met her before. There was an empty seat next to her. I sat down and we started chatting. What do you do? What do you do? And she mentioned that she was working on this project, and she said, with you being a communication person, you might, have some insight into how we could potentially promote this. And I said, oh my gosh, please let me join and help. And so that's how I joined the project. And ever since, we've worked really closely with them. We've worked really closely with faculty in the College of Social Work, Dr. Julie Sarah, who's wonderful. And you kind of mentioned at the top, it's not just clinicians, although there certainly are clinicians working in this space, but it's been really cool to see, the variety of disciplines and areas that have contributed to this work. So we officially launched the communication campaign associated with QPR in September of 2024. And so we put together, with Cece's help and the help of several others, which has been so cool to involve students, we sort of laid out a comms plan. We partnered with people at UKPR to help us engage with community organizations across the state. We've been going to Rotary clubs and chambers of commerce and talking. We've done some social media advertising. We've, various health fairs and events, and writing op-eds, and just sort of thinking through all the different ways, all the different platforms that we have that we can use to get the word out. And I should have mentioned, Cece was in my ISC 161 class, which is a large sort of intro lecture class with like 230 students. And I guess I must have been talking about my research that day, hopefully to shine light on some example I was talking about that made sense for the course. And she came up and introduced herself and said she wanted to get involved, which I was incredibly impressed by. She was, 18? Were you 18 at the time?
Probably.
You were a freshman, right?
Who's to say?
Yeah, first semester of college. And I was like, absolutely, come work on my team. And she has been invaluable ever since. And I'm on a mission to convince her to stay here for her master's and continue working with me. So,
and little did she know you already had 4 years worth of
Right.
experience, to kind of bring you up to this point. And so then when you introduced yourself, you were like, well, you don't know this, but I have all this like experience with this. So let me help you.
yeah, absolutely. And another like small moment where I was like, okay, this is cool. This student wants to get involved. And like, little did I know, she's just, she is a partner just as valuable as anybody else sort of collaborating in this space. I can't imagine doing this without her.
Well, talking from a student perspective, just kind of delving into that idea of the student role in this and peers helping peers. What has your experience been with that as far as like being able to take this training to your fellow students and how they've been receptive to it and what maybe it has meant for people who have needed help to be able to have somebody that's in their own peer group be able to kind of be there and provide that kind of assistance?
Yeah, so the organization I was in all through high school was kind of built on this idea that students notice when their peers are struggling so much more quickly than any teacher will. And it's also that students are going to be so much more confident going to a peer when they need support. And I saw that to be extremely true. But that also like translates to this in so many ways, because when we're pitching it to a student organization, to have a student come and talk and say like, as a student, I've used it in these ways, it's impacted me positively, and it's an easy thing to do. It really does increase that credibility. It makes our students feel a lot more trusting of the message that we're like conveying to them. And I do think that it's really helped me feel more confident in the way that I promote the training as well, just because I've seen it work amongst my peers.
I was going to say, you've actually used this training in real life.
Yes.
And so like in that experience, if you can talk about that, like what went through your mind and how did that training like kick in, even if it was like subconsciously, like looking back on it, you're like, oh yeah, I knew to do this because of.
Absolutely. When I was trained in it the first time, my instructors made us do a lot of role-playing scenarios, which really helped me. When like it first came up, I think I was sitting in a stairwell in my high school with one of my friends, and I was like, I'm noticing that you're really withdrawn, and I just want to check in. Are you considering suicide? And that's a scary question to ask. And I was scared, but I also was more scared that they weren't going to survive, And I think that really, like, just having the training and like getting to practice those words, that became a lot of my role later on in high school too, was helping newer students learn the training and really get it in their bodies and like practice saying the hard things. And just having that like confidently within myself really makes it less scary to use, but it definitely was a scary thing to do. And it is still a scary thing to do. I think the hardest thing is to really like accept the fact that someone you love is not well and that you need to do something about it. But once you get past that, I think it really is a very usable training.
Sarah, when you hear about moments like that from CC or from other students, what does that mean to you both as an educator and a researcher?
I think that's incredibly powerful. I love hearing stories from people who have used the training, who have expressed hope or really created hope in many ways for people who find themselves in a dark place. So, that's the ultimate goal, I think, as a teacher and a researcher, right? To see a student, grasp that concept and use it in their real lives. And then, from a research perspective, anything we can do to bring those risk levels down, that's the ultimate goal. So I love hearing her talk about it.
Have either of you seen examples where QPR has like started broader conversations and maybe helped kind of change how students talk about mental health? Or maybe this is part of a bigger picture of like, we're putting so much more attention on this in this area across the board. And this is just one piece of that puzzle.
Yeah. The student piece is obviously an incredibly important piece. We're focused really on the entire state of Kentucky, but I think empowering students to take this training and to use the training is going to have a ripple effect across the state, because obviously these students are going to go on to live lives of meaning and purpose throughout the state and go back to their communities, and so it's an incredibly important audience, and one that can help us reach others as well.
So digging into like how long we've been doing this now, we've gotten some data back and some feedback. So what has that told us so far about the effectiveness of QPR, and maybe also too, like things that maybe you incorporate into moving forward to help students maybe overcome that hesitation, asking tough questions, checking in with people. I mean, what have you learned so far from what we've seen from it being implemented?
Yeah, well, the first thing that came to my mind when you asked what have you seen has been sort of the heat map of number of trainings completed. If you look at the map of Kentucky, shaded in according to how many people have taken the training at the very beginning of this initiative, or even at the very beginning of the communication campaign, and then you compare that to the map where we're at now, it's so awesome to look at. It's so rewarding. There are only a handful of counties, I think, left where we don't have any training. So I think the communication and the promotion of the training has been really successful so far. We're not done. We want to, keep spreading the word as far as we can. But that's been really great to see. There's research about the effectiveness of QPR. Like I said, the data shows that within a given community, when training rates go up, suicide rates have been shown to come down. We also are collecting data as people take the training. There's sort of a post-survey afterward that talks about, or it measures people's efficacy. How much confidence do you have in yourself to be able to do this, which gives us an indication of whether the training is effective or not. And those results have all been very positive. I
recently had Chief Joe Monroe from UK Police on. One of the things we were talking about was, the steps that they have taken in recent years to address some things that the public have asked about, that they've been, they've met with administration and they've looked at kind of the lay of the land on things, and reporting for like assaults or violent crimes, sexual assaults, things like that. Like the reporting on those things, they've made a real concerted effort to increase that. And there's been, and kind of his take on it was that, there's been a lot of kind of spotlight on the fact that we see numbers from this, but the reason why we're seeing numbers is because the volume of reporting has gone up. More people are being vocal about these things. More people are bringing this to the forefront to turn these things in and make reports on things. And then you start to see those numbers taper off. And I wonder if there's like some kind of loose correlation to that, in that sense where you start to see this training and who's taking the training. And maybe, I don't know if there's a way to gauge like prevented occurrences.
Right. Yeah.
But there is at least a way to look at where the numbers are for like instances where suicide has happened, and maybe see that those numbers, like you said, those numbers start to drop off and make those kind of data correlations. Am I on to something like that?
I think there are some connections, definitely. I will say that on a global scale, the incidence rates of suicide are coming down, which is really wonderful. However, if you look at the United States alone, those rates are going up. So we're bucking the global trend in a bad way. So of course, that's data that we can look at. In terms of like indicators that people are seeking help or are talking to each other more, there's the 988 National Suicide and Crisis Hotline. I would imagine that they probably publish number of calls, number of texts. I would also imagine that there's probably not a lot more information given the privacy concerns and the sensitive nature of that data. But that would be one indicator, and it is kind of strange in the same way that you articulated with Chief Monroe and reports of crime, right? Like you don't want more reports in that you don't want crime to increase, you don't want, suicidality to increase. But if people feel more comfortable reporting, if people feel more comfortable calling 988, that is a victory, definitely. So, yeah, that would be, I think, those connections. And we talk about barriers and stigma and, indicators that people are more comfortable discussing it, asking for help, et cetera. One of the things that we're really trying to encourage people to do is to use the word suicide, right? If it's the boogeyman and it's this word that we don't use, it's Voldemort, right? That doesn't help us in destigmatizing it. It doesn't help people feel comfortable in talking about it, whether they're the ones that it is hurt, whether they are the person that is hurting or whether they're concerned about someone else. So a project that Cece and I are kind of contemplating at the moment is focused on language around suicide and encouraging, like I said, encouraging people to use the word, but also encouraging people to talk about this very sad phenomenon in a hopeful way. And there's some research that shows like the way you, for example, in the media, angle a story or the pictures you choose, those kinds of things, those decisions, whether it's language or images, can impact risk factors of people who are currently struggling. And so we're thinking through, we've got a project where we're working with reporters to think through how we can educate them and work with them to understand how we can make reporting safer, but also thinking about just the general public, educating them and trying to persuade them to talk about this in a slightly different way, because words can be very powerful, words can be very meaningful. And so that's something else that we're focused on as well.
Cece, do you think that changing the framing on that is something that is needed to help with students, like overcoming that hesitation to ask tough questions or just take that first step to check in with someone?
Absolutely. I think there's a perceived risk when it comes to discussing really anything mental health related that definitely prevents a lot of students from speaking like honestly about a lot of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think that the more we get to focus on those discussions, the more comfortable a lot of people will become with those discussions. I know, like, in my high school, having a group focused on suicide prevention that would say the word suicide and would say mental health support definitely did improve the way that generally our students spoke about mental health crises and suicide. So I think that having really any organization focused on those discussions really will improve our students' commitment to starting those tough conversations as well.
Going back to when we were talking about this earlier and that kind of correlation between QPR and CPR, one of the things that they talk about in CPR training is that when you get this training, the hesitancy to use it, like some people have a fear of using it because they're afraid that I'm going to hurt this person. And the rationale there, or the response to that is this person is already in a place where you can't hurt them any worse than what they're going through right now. So if you're afraid of breaking a rib, it's okay because they're facing a much worse alternative to that. Can we look at QPR in kind of a similar fashion in that, like, when you have this training and you have that language and I've been taught through this training now how to approach these conversations and what to say. Better to do this from a place of I'm concerned about you, as opposed to holding back and not saying something, because again, like, the alternative is much worse than what you may think that you're kind of ham-handed going into this and fumbling for the right words to say.
I think I have two different answers to this. First, there is a belief, an inaccurate one, that mentioning suicide to someone will increase the risk that they will die by suicide. That's not true, and QPR educates people on that, makes sure that they know it's safe to discuss suicide even with someone that might be considering suicide.
Inception is not a thing in this space. You cannot, like, you think about the movie Inception, right? Where, like, you put a thought into someone's head. Like, right. There's no evidence that suggests that happens when somebody expresses concern. Sorry, Cece,
no,
keep
you're
going.
Fine. So QPR definitely.
Good dialogue.
Absolutely. QPR really educates people on some of those myths and makes it more makes people more comfortable starting those conversations because there is less of a risk.
That makes a lot of sense, because to me, I think there were probably situations where a lot of times people are like, I'm just glad somebody said something to me, because then I felt like there was somebody that I could talk to.
Absolutely.
Because before, I felt like there was nobody who would understand this, or nobody that I could even try to explain this to or try to have a conversation with. Even if they didn't understand, the fact that somebody was listening to me made me feel like I was not alone in this. And, there was somebody there, a support in a sense.
Right. Absolutely. I think a lot of times people are hesitant to step in because they worry that whatever help they're going to get that person will be unpleasant. However, even a broken promise is better than someone who has died. So there is risk. There have been times in my life where someone was unsafe and I had to make a choice to keep them safe, and they were mad at me for many months, and that's worth it to keep that person alive. And I think that acknowledging that risk as well before having to kind of follow through with it is something that QPR really helps with too.
And I'd like to add something to that, and I'm going to get a little nerdy here for a second and start talking about theory. I'm sure we've just lost a few listeners.
No, that's okay.
She's always doing this.
But I think it's relevant. So there are two really important factors. Well, there's more than two, but the two that are relevant to this conversation that increase someone's risk for suicide. One of them is feeling like a burden on others, and the other one is a lack of belonging. So if you think about that, right, expressing care for someone, expressing hope, saying, hey, I'm worried about you, that's going to make somebody feel like they're part of a community. They know somebody loves them, cares about them. There's a gentleman who I believe his name is Kevin Hines. He's in the suicide prevention space, and kind of goes around the country and speaks at events and things like that. He is one of the people who attempted to take his own life on the Golden Gate Bridge, but actually survived. And he tells this story about how, he's on the bridge, he's crying, he's, at his lowest point, and he sees a stranger walking toward him. And there was still a part of him that hoped that stranger would notice, based on the look on his face, how much pain he was in. And unfortunately, that person did not stop. But I think that story speaks to, he was still looking for a sense of belonging, even from a complete stranger in that last moment. So I think people maybe don't realize how powerful just asking someone, hey, are you okay? Or saying, I really care about you and I'm really worried about you. That can be a massively important, turning point for someone. And it's not that simple, of course. Suicide is very complex, right? There's, a lot more that goes into this, but that doesn't change the fact that providing somebody hope can be an incredibly positive thing.
More and more, we see stories where people are resorting to using AI, chat GPT or chat models as sounding boards for their thoughts, as therapists. And oftentimes in the news, we see the negative effects of that, where people are using those and they're getting really bad advice. But I think that regardless of where that debate is, it definitely underscores a really great need for people to have people to talk with, for
Connection.
people to have that kind of human connection and get that help, or at least have that kind of sounding board. Is that something that, in your work and in your studies, is that started to kind of creep in, that kind of conversation about people using AI for that, and what kind of that kind of foretells for kind of where we are as a society?
Yeah, I think it definitely speaks to, exactly as you just said, the need for connection, the need for someone to talk to. And it was funny, you said human connection, and we're talking about AI, right? So you're talking to a non-human. But so yes, I think that it definitely speaks to that need. I think that, yes, there's lots of conversations happening sort of in the field about what is the impact of AI. And, again, you hear the times where it provided information that was objectively unsafe. And so that's concerning. And there's been efforts to rectify that. But I think we're still kind of figuring it out, what the real impact is. I know I've got many students have told me that they use ChatGPT as a therapist. I don't know, Cece, if you've heard of your friends or
I can't
peers.
say I've heard of anyone I know doing that. And it sounds scary to me, but maybe it's okay. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would imagine that there are all kinds of concerns, like from a user perspective, right? Like, information that you're putting in, private information you're putting into the internet.
That seems like a big problem.
Yeah. And what sources it's pulling from in terms of responding and providing advice. So I think that will be a really interesting thing to watch. And there may be more information that's available that I've just haven't been privy to yet. But yeah, I would imagine if we could hear this conversation 10 years ago, we would be scratching our heads pretty hard about talking to the computer.
Well, right. And we're definitely pushing the limitations and pushing the outer boundaries of what this does. I mean, you're using these things for everything from I need a really good chocolate chip cookie recipe to I need to figure out why my car is making this specific noise to I need a health diagnosis for this cough that I have or this there's something going on physically with me to mental health issues. It's kind of this broad application that, people are using it for a wild degree of things. Its ability in some of these areas is astounding to be able to kind of collate and sift through large amounts of data and be able to kind of pull things from it that would take a person a long time. I read some article recently where somebody was talking about they do reviews of something, and they were saying that to do this in my own time, it would involve so many 45 hours of my work time and whatever, several sandwiches and whatever other things they were factoring in, and it took this thing 2 minutes to kind of sift through all this data and pull this together, which then made their job much easier to kind of pull from that. And I can see the benefits in that regard, but I can also see the pitfalls on the other side of it being stuck. And we've all seen those stories of being stuck in kind of a loop of giving you bad information. So that is definitely something to kind of keep an eye on and follow as we, move into the future with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Back to a personal human kind of level, how do you both keep this work, because it's such a difficult subject matter, how do you keep this work emotionally sustainable and keep on with this, because you're dealing with some of the darkest moments that people are encountering?
I think for me, the fact that it is research-based and getting to look at it kind of from that analytical standpoint a lot of times helps a lot. I also have a true passion for it. So I'm excited to wake up in the morning and talk about these really sad things because it does make me, I feel like I have purpose here. And so it does get heavy. It's hard. There are days when it's just not in the cards for me to do this kind of work. But I think for the most part, A, the fact that it's analytical, and B, the fact that I do love doing it makes it really doable.
I think for me, there have definitely been days where I have come home and sort of felt the heaviness. I went to a 2-day training, I guess you would call it. So it was all day for 2 days talking about these issues. And I came home and let myself cry for 30 minutes or so. But I had some really wonderful friends who recognized, I just needed to kind of get it out, right? So I think surrounding yourself with the right people has been very helpful for me. And anytime I talk about it, I usually from the very top try to anchor everything in yes, this is dark, this is heavy, this is sad. But on the flip side, this is a really big opportunity for us to make a really big difference.
Mm-hmm. What is next for QPR at UK and also across the Commonwealth?
So we want to continue pushing this training. And by pushing, I mean making people aware of the training, first of all, of course, across the state, all 120 counties. but then also persuading people sort of why it matters and how it can be helpful, and framing it as a community responsibility, not something that is just for those people over there who are struggling. Because what we've heard at all of these events is that this struggle doesn't know a zip code, right? It's in all of them. So many people have come up and shared their stories with us, which has been really an honor that people have trusted us with those painful details. So again, pushing out throughout the state, trying to make that heat map even darker in terms of people who've completed the trainings, and then thinking through some other opportunities to continue to destigmatize the topic. So like I said, trying to use the project that we're working on now, sort of at the brainstorming beginning phase, is how we might use people's stories to sort of convey how talking about suicide really matters. So like an easy example is, I shouldn't say technically. An easy example is the word committed. Right? That's sort of the standard way that we talk about suicide. You say somebody committed suicide. If you dig a little bit deeper into that, think about the other things that the word committed is associated with. Committed a sin, committed a crime. It's this kind of underlying negative, not hopeful kind of connotation. So we encourage people to say died by suicide. Mm-hmm. It sounds more human, mm-hmm. right? It sort of honors the person more as well. And so it's little things like that. And that might seem like super small and inconsequential, but that's part of a larger effort to change the way we think about it, change the way we talk about it, so that if somebody who is in a dark place, alone, who feels alone, feels like they're struggling alone, those small moments matter. And we want to always encourage people to seek help if they need it.
Are there new directions that you think we'd like to see as far as like maybe, for example, integrating QPR into student orientation or part of the residence halls like the RAs, things like that, or, UK healthcare outreach, different things that they're doing? Are there some places that you're already kind of seeing and we may make some inroads in with this training?
Yeah, we would love that. I know that there have been efforts on campus. Julie Searle had a large grant a few years ago focused on suicide prevention on campus. And there are some other trainings that are similar to QPR, or she's developed a specific training program that really focuses on sort of planning for, if I have a really bad day, planning for my worst day ahead of time, who do I call, those kinds of things. So there have been efforts that have been focused on the campus. But yes, absolutely. We're always looking to expand and get the word out to additional people. Right now, we're meeting all of the Greek organizations. I've been going to their chapter meetings on Monday nights, sort of slowly working my way through the list of organizations and trying to encourage the Greek men and women on our campus to engage in the training as well.
Cece, as a student who has, had experience using this training, for someone listening who is thinking, and not even necessarily a student, just as someone who's used this, for someone listening and they're thinking, I'm not sure I could ever ask these questions, what advice would you give them off the top of your head?
Practice. Honestly, I think like what really got me and like my whole high school cohort like through this challenging thing we did was that we got to do it like before we had to, we got to practice saying the word suicide just like during our class periods, and getting comfortable saying those things before it's like a high pressure situation really does make it easier. If you're driving in your car and music goes out, just ask 2 sentences, pick 2 questions that feel relevant. QPR will give you like good examples of questions you can ask that will start that discussion, and you can just practice them. And I think that helps me. I also think we are so much more capable than a lot of us think we are, especially in like interpersonal situations. There is an innate understanding that we have among people. And I think that when you need to do something, you can make it happen.
Since we're talking about, we're UK Healthcare offering this, how can everyone, faculty, staff, students, take part in being part of this safety net that we've been talking about?
Well, the first way is to take the training, of course, at ukhealthcare.com/QPR. So that's an easy first step. And then sharing the fact that the training is available and for free with colleagues, with family members, with friends. I think thinking through, again, the way we talk about mental health and the way we talk about suicide, trying to be really cognizant of conversations that might further stigmatize versus conversations that might destigmatize the issue. And honestly, I think just in general, kindness is something that we should all strive to show. You walk across this campus, you pass 50 people, you don't know what those people are going through. Somebody may be going through a breakup. Somebody may have lost a parent. Somebody may just have having a really, really bad day, right? And I think we can all make an effort to just be kind as often as we can.
I want to echo that, but I also want to say, if you don't want to type in a URL, you can just Google UK Healthcare QPR and it'll show up.
Yes, you can.
Excellent. Is there one myth about suicide prevention that you would most like to debunk?
The one about if you ask somebody if they're contemplating suicide, that you might put the idea into their head, I think is the most dangerous one. That's the big barrier, I think, for initiating a conversation.
Yeah, there's a belief that suicide is inevitable. I think that's something that we should really work to combat. It's really not. When we were making the guidelines, we were sourcing from other places, and there was one that said suicide is a largely preventable form of death. And I disagree with that. I believe it is wholly preventable. And I think we should work to make sure people know that it's not inevitable.
Yeah, I've got one more. There's actually a book called Myths About Suicide. It's written by Thomas Joyner. He's one of the sort of most prolific scholars in the suicide prevention space. And he makes a really compelling argument that suicide is not selfish. I think people sometimes view it that way, or I've heard people, say that out loud. But if you take a step back, somebody who makes a decision to take their own life is in profound pain. And like I said before, feeling like a burden, likely feeling like they don't have a community. And if somebody is viewing exiting this world as their only path toward making the pain stop, that's not selfish, right? And so I think changing that misconception as well is very important.
Well, I do want to re-emphasize the message. QPR is short, it is free, and it can save lives. So I want to encourage everyone to visit that website or do that Google search to check that out, ukhealthcare.com/QPR, or you can Google search UK Healthcare QPR. I just want to thank Sarah Geegan and CC Rhein so much for taking the time to talk about this. It's very important. I think especially now, at this point in time of the year, it's always important to kind of have those conversations because we see that around holiday times at the end of the year. Those tend to be times when people are most sensitive, or this is a very acute kind of subject matter. And so I think it's good timing that we're talking about this right now, because it's that time of year. Not that there's a specific time of year, but there are external factors, I think, that kind of press upon people.
Oh, absolutely. It's starting to get dark at like 4:00 in the afternoon, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So thank you both so much. And I just want to leave you with saying, you don't have to be a counselor to make a difference. Sometimes just asking a question can change a life. So I want to encourage everybody to keep that in mind. Again, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for listening to Behind the Blue. If you or someone you know is struggling with suicidal thoughts, you are not alone. Call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline for free confidential support 24 hours a day. To learn more about suicide prevention and free online QPR training available to all Kentuckians, visit ukhealthcare.com/QPR. Behind the Blue is a joint production of the University of Kentucky and UK Healthcare. For more stories about UK and UK Healthcare, visit uknow.uky.edu.